if you can always say, what do you think, Jennifer?
Yeah, I think you should answer the questions, Jennifer.
If you've signed into our Facebook Live, you're in the right place with Legal Aid of Arkansas. We're going to wait a minute or so to see if we get more participants. You've reached Facebook Live on Legal Aid of Arkansas, the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. We're about to start. Give us a few more seconds to see if we get more participants. You're on Facebook Live with the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic at Legal Aid of Arkansas. We're going to start in a few seconds. Hello, this is Jennifer Gardiner from Legal Aid of Arkansas, the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. Today, we are going to talk about tax deadlines and everything you need to know as the 2024 tax season comes to an end. This is a record-breaking long title. We thought we would get a little chuckle out of that. And we are welcoming today Stephanie Flanary from AppalReD Legal Aid in Kentucky, and my colleague Johnathan Carter from Legal Aid of Arkansas. I'm Jennifer Gardiner. I'm the director of the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic at Legal Aid of Arkansas. We represent low-income taxpayers in their controversies with the IRS. We also educate taxpayers in their tax rights and responsibilities. Remember that throughout this presentation, which is going to be brief, under 1/2 hour, please submit us any questions you have into the chat, and we will get our panel to answer it right here live. You can put in a question at any time. Next slide. So today we have a very ambitious outline. We are going to talk about problem solving day with the IRS. We're talking about everything you need to know about economic impact payments, the deadline for filing your tax return, and understanding why your refund has been delayed, and a couple of pointers on how to file your tax return or an extension. So next up is my colleague, Johnathan.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Johnathan Carter. I'm a staff attorney with Legal Aid of Arkansas's Fair Housing Clinic located in Little Rock. To give you a little background about myself, I earned my law degree from the University of Arkansas, and I also earned a master's in taxation from the University of Missouri at Kansas City. One of the degree requirements that we had was to participate in the school's low-income taxpayer clinic. And to be honest, it was the best part of my tax degree program. Fortunately, since I've joined working with Legal Aid of Arkansas, I also get to devote some of my time to helping clients in the low-income taxpayer clinic with Legal Aid of Arkansas. And that leads me to announce that on April 24th, 2024, Legal Aid of Arkansas and the IRS's Taxpayer Advocate Service will be hosting a taxpayer problem-solving day. During this tax clinic, we will be assisting clients that come in who don't need a reservation or an appointment time to basically focus on understanding their communications with the IRS, such as bringing in a letter and you don't understand what that letter means. We will help you understand what that letter means. We also plan on answering a bunch of other issues that are commonly raised, such as where is my refund? Or how do I file a tax return I haven't filed in years? These issues will be answered on April 24th.
Jonathan, just a quick interruption. Are you going to be at the problem solving day?
I will, and I look forward to meeting a lot of you there.
That's great. So we're going to have 2 lawyers there from the LITC, and we'll have another person from the IRS. So hopefully we'll be able to answer everybody's questions.
Certainly hope that we'll be able to answer quite a few questions that day. The clinic is going to be held at the Fletcher Library in Little Rock, Arkansas, located at 823 North Buchanan Street in the meeting room. Again, you don't need a reservation, and it will be taking place the hours of 10 a.m. through 1 p.m. We hope to see as many of you as can show up. Now, let's go on with our presentation and talk about economic impact payments with Stephanie.
But you missed a step here, Jonathan. Turns out we're going to have a help desk sitting right next to the IRS problem solving day.
That is correct, Jennifer. You are right. Thank you for jogging my memory on that. That the Center for Arkansas Legal Services will also be having a legal clinic assistance day. Well, they'll be answering general legal questions such as issues with domestic relations, family law, economic justice, and a host of other issues. So if you have any of those issues, please come to the Taxpayer Problem Solving Day.
Hey, and by the way, Jonathan, I did one of these help desks with CALS a couple of years ago, where I didn't have the IRS there. It was just me doing the tax questions and then the other CALS attorneys answering the other questions. And boy, we had a line. But they were able to handle everybody who came through the door. They had quite a few attorneys there, and we were able to see an awful lot of people. So we're hoping it's some of the same for this one at the Fletcher Library. Thanks, Jonathan.
Absolutely. Thank you. Look forward to seeing everyone there.
Stephanie.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Flanary. I am a director of a low-income taxpayer clinic at AppalReD Legal Aid here in Kentucky, and I am happy to be here today to talk to you about stimulus payments. It seems odd that here in 2024, we are still talking about stimulus payments that were released back in 2020 and 2021. But as of this morning, the Taxpayers Advocate's Office indicated that 940,000 taxpayers have yet to receive their refunds for tax year 2020. And that means there's $1 trillion or $1 billion on the table for tax year 2020. So a lot of people still haven't received their refund. And if that's you, it's very important that you listen up, because your deadline to file your 2020 tax return is coming up on May 17th of this year. So literally you have a month and a couple of days to get your tax return filed.
Or what, Stephanie?
Or you will not be able to obtain your stimulus payments that were issued in 2020. So it is a drop dead deadline. There won't be any obtaining the funds if you haven't filed a return. And that means sent in a paper return to the IRS that is postmarked by May 17th of this year. So
by the way, Stephanie, whenever we tell taxpayers to send in a paper anything, we ask them to use tracking at the post office so that they can have a physical copy of something that says the date they sent it to the IRS.
Right, that's an excellent idea, and I highly recommend that you do that. If you're one of the people who has yet to file your 2020 return, please do mail it to the IRS certified so that you get proof back that they received it. That's a great idea.
So Stephanie, I see this chart about how the payments were made, but we have a question that says, how do I know, because I can't remember, how do I know that these payments were made?
So if you don't recall whether or not you received your stimulus payments, you can call the IRS and ask them. You can obtain a tax transcript that'll tell you whether or not they were issued. Or you can check your bank account for that time period to see if it was deposited into your bank account. There's several ways you can set up, or if you've already set up a account with the IRS, you can go into your account and check to see if the payments were issued to you. But
Okay.
there are, yeah, some people do forget whether or not they received it. It is a good idea. And I do want to talk just for a minute about them, just kind of jog your memory about how it worked. The first payments were issued in April of 2020, and they were for $1,200. The thing to remember about that payment was that it could not be offset. So a lot of people get confused now thinking that they can get that $1,200 no matter what, but that is not the case. At this point in time, the only way to get the first stimulus payment is to file a 2020 tax return and claim what's called a recovery rebate credit for that amount, and that can be offset. So if you owe a non-IRS debt or a debt to the IRS, the funds will be offset to pay for that debt. So if you owe child support, some student loans, a state tax debt, most likely when you file your return, the money will be offset to pay for that. The second payment was $600 and was issued in late 2020 or early 2021. Again, those were not offset, but at this point they would be if you owed something. What's most important to remember about that is when you file your 2020 return, you're going to include both of those stimulus payments. So you would be asking for your $1,200 and your $600 EIP if you haven't already received them.
So we had a question about what if you're divorced and one of the parents got the payment for the child, but the other one says, I was entitled to it. What do I do then?
Well, there's certainly no harm in asking the IRS, and if you're the one entitled to those payments, then you can file a return and seek the recovery rebate credit. And if you don't receive it, you'll have many appeal rights to the IRS, and you can follow those and try to convince the IRS that you were the one entitled to them. You'll send them your divorce decree showing that you are the person that can claim the child during even numbered years. And if that's the case, then you should have been the parent who received those funds for that year. Do you have anything else to add about that, Jennifer?
Well, I was thinking, but what if you're divorced and one of the spouses got your payment?
Well, I think if you were divorced, for sure the IRS would issue the payment back. You would just need to show your divorce decree and show that you were divorced prior to the issuing of the economic impact payments.
That seems actually even possibly in our experience is even a little harder than with the children, because the IRS expects the one spouse to give it to the other one, and yes, sometimes it doesn't happen that way. All right, should we go on to 2021?
Yes, let's talk about 2021. So the IRS issued one payment in 2021. It was for $1,400 per person. So if you had dependents, then they also were to receive $1,400. It was issued in March of that year. If you have not received it, you have a little bit more time to request it. The deadline for 2021 is April 15th of 2025. So you still have a year and a few months to request those. But what we're telling people is if you know that you were due your 2020 economic impact payments and your 2021, then just go ahead and do 2 paper returns, mail them in separate envelopes to the IRS, and have both of those envelopes be certified and trackable so that you know they received them. But go ahead and file those returns now. Even though, Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you can still file electronically for 2021.
And we've been doing that recently. We've been handing somebody a 2020 paper return, but e-filing the 21.
Right.
I always tell people that it takes 45 minutes for me to do the first return, but it takes 5 to do the second. So it's much easier to get to the same person, whoever it is, and have them do multiple returns if you have to do multiple returns. So
So it's important to keep in mind too, you see that last note that these payments were issued based upon the 2019 tax returns. So if you were claimed as a dependent by someone in 2019, then you would not be eligible for those payments in 2020. And that could be one of the reasons you didn't get them if you haven't already received them.
But if
So-
you didn't, if you were no longer dependent, I guess you could argue with the IRS
Right.
that was sent out incorrectly. And of course, Stephanie and I are only involved essentially in when people have controversies with the IRS. So we know
Right.
a lot about these arguments.
Right.
Okay, are we next? Good to move on. I think we've answered those questions. I think we got another question that says, can I track the status of the economic impact payment? I think you told us that the answer to that is you can go online to see when they were paid out. And we are always arguing here on Facebook Live and to every one of our clients, set up an online account with the IRS. It's a little difficult to do it. But it takes some attention. It takes your IDs. It takes you having to have a tax return in front of you. But it's worthwhile because you have access to a lot of information, not only on irs.gov, but on other federal agency websites with the same sign-in information. So we always are telling people, set up your online account. So what are we concerned about right this moment? Oh,
Yeah.
I think we already covered this.
Yeah, I think did cover most of that. It is too late to get your economic impact payments, but you can file a return and ask for the recovery rebate credit. And really the only difference between those two is what I said, that recovery rebate credits can be offset. So if you owe a debt, they are going to offset your stimulus payments to pay for that.
Right. Okay. So we specifically set up this Facebook Live to come in right before the filing deadline. The filing deadline is Monday, April 15th. You want to file your tax return by April 15th, especially if you owe the IRS. If you have a balance due on your tax return, and believe me, I've seen them as low as $10 or even $1, if the computer sees that you owe money when you file your tax return late, there will be a late filing penalty. So you either need to ask for an extension or file your return by Monday, April 15th. We've been sending people to VITA, everybody's very, very busy. It's already April 11th. I know a lot of people will be spending this weekend working on their tax returns, but if you cannot do it by Monday, then file for an extension. The IRS has been advertising this. You can go on to irs.gov, which is listed here on our little flyer. You can use the IRS free file. Anybody can do that. Doesn't matter about what your AGI is, how much money you earn. You can use free file to just ask for an extension. It's really, really easy to fill out that form. We don't show the whole form here, but we show the important ingredients. At the top, it says line 4, estimate of total tax liability, then your total payments, then the balance due, and then the amount you're paying. If you're filing an extension online, you're not paying. So if you're going to file it on paper and you want to send in money, then make sure you have it postmarked by Monday or on Monday. But I am one to tell you that I got up bright and early this morning and I filed 2 extensions on 2 different tax software companies to just so I could tell you about my experience. Very easy, extremely easy. And guess what I put on those lines? For the 2 people I find the extension, estimate of total tax liability, 0. Total payments, 0. Balance due, 0. It all works. Amount you're paying, 0. All you want is the extension to go in. If you have numbers, go ahead and fill it out. I had someone call me in a panic this morning. Email me this morning in a panic. I don't know how to fill it out. I don't know if I'm going to owe any money. That's fine. You're not being held to anything that's on this form except you're requesting an extension. When you request an extension, you get an extension. Nobody is denied an extension. It's an automatic extension. You're just saying, push the button. Well, you are pushing the button if you file it electronically. If you do it on paper, the IRS has to process it. Again, make sure you have evidence that you sent it on time. What's the consequence of not filing for an extension and you file late? Well, if you're getting a refund, there's no balance due that the IRS can assess a penalty on. You have to have a balance due to assess a penalty, so you're okay if you're filing and saying I get a refund. If you owe money, then you're going to get a penalty. So make sure that you file this extension. We have on the previous slide, we said, you know, if you want to get a refund, you're okay, just like Stephanie said, to file a return for 3 years back. You have 3 years from now to request a refund. Why would anybody wait for 3 years? I don't know, but you could have 3 years. I would rush if I was getting a refund, but you have 3 years to ask for a refund. If you don't ask for the refund within the 3-year deadline, even if you file a return that has a refund on it, you won't get it. It's by law. You just won't get it. If you want to file an extension and you need the paper form, you can get it right on irs.gov and print it. If you don't have a printer, go to your library, print the form at the library. Some of the VITA sites won't do, VITA, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance sites won't do extensions, but they might give you the form. We've asked them to put the forms out so that you can just pick one up and mail it. E-filing is easier. Yes, someone just asked what happens if you miss the tax filing deadline. Depends on if it's a refund return or a tax due return, as I just explained. Next. Oh my gosh, you filed your tax return, but you didn't get your refund. So the IRS advertises that most taxpayers get their refunds within 21 days of filing their tax return. If you call the IRS, they will not talk to you for a lot longer than that about what is causing the delay in your refund. And we get a flood of people coming to our office saying, I haven't got my refund, and the IRS won't tell me why. Over time, the IRS is adding a little bit to the online accounts and the where's my refund tool to tell you why your refund is delayed. If it's delayed more than 6 weeks, they should be sending you a letter saying why. Lots of times when people come to us really early on, we can't tell what the delay is. And the IRS won't tell us because nobody seems to be able to untangle why it's been put off to the side. But here's some of what we are hearing. Stephanie, help us with this.
Yes, so let's talk about identity verification. This is going to come up a lot for anyone listening to this program who has not received their stimulus payments because they haven't filed a tax return in years. So if you haven't filed a tax return in some time or ever, when you do file your return, it is very likely that you might get flagged for identity verification. If that happens, it can be very simple to address. What you're going to need to have with you to verify your identity is the tax return that you filed, the letter the IRS sends to you letting you know that you need to verify your identity, your Social Security card, and a state-issued photo ID. So if you have those things with you, you should be able to go to the link that you'll find in the letter the IRS sends to you, and you'll be able to upload the information, chat with an agent briefly, and have your identity verified and your refund sent to you. Sometimes it doesn't go as smoothly as you would like because when you are verifying, they also ask you questions about a prior year return. And if you've never filed a tax return prior to the year that you have been flagged for verification, then they're going to tell you that you're going to have to go into the local office for an appointment. But first you try to verify online, and then if that doesn't work, you make a telephone call to the phone number that's in your letter. And if that doesn't work, then you set up an in-person appointment with your local IRS office. So
And
just
on our, excuse me, Stephanie, on our PowerPoint, we abbreviated that as TAC. That's a Taxpayer
There.
Assistance Center.
yes, I call it the local IRS office, but yes, that's their official name, the Taxpayer Assistance Center. So if this happens to you, don't fret, don't worry about it. Just keep up with the letter that the IRS sends you, because it does have a code on it, a long list of numbers that they're going to ask you for, and you really need that letter. So I always tell my clients, hey, go ahead and take a photograph of that letter as soon as you get it. In the event that you misplace it, you'll have a picture of it on your telephone. So here at the tax clinic, we are happy to help you verify your identity or help you walk through the steps to do that.
So sometimes people get these letters and it turns out they didn't file that tax return. So that's not a good situation because
Right.
that means somebody else filed it. And we always get that taxpayer to drop, usually it's somebody who's not required to file. We get them to prepare a tax return and file it and send it in. Sometimes the IRS says send it in with an identity theft affidavit, but you can just send it in response to the notice and say, this is my true tax return. That was not me. And that takes a little while to process, not a terribly long time. But the problem with ignoring that notice is we don't know what's going to happen next with regard to that tax return that was submitted. So you really want to address this letter notice either way, whether you filed a tax return or you didn't.
That's correct.
So there can be so many reasons that your tax return was stopped in processing. Lots of times, here's a list of things that people forget to do. They make mistakes. You prepare your own return, you make a mistake, the preparer misses a digit. You really want to check your tax return so that an error doesn't happen. But the IRS, we do have people coming back with tax returns that the IRS, actually paper returns that they return to the taxpayer because there's got a problem with it. They also get notices from the IRS saying that they've changed the tax return. Sometimes, for example, if a child's dependent's, name or something, they could just take the kid off and send you a notice, and then you have to deal with that controversy. You just want to be careful the first time around, but an error can absolutely delay the processing of your refund return. We hope that doesn't happen to you, but we can help you if any of these things happen. Ooh, boy, we got a really good question. What should I do if I suspect my refund has been lost or stolen? Well, let's take a step back from that. Why would you think it's lost or stolen? And that's because you went on Where's My Refund and you know the IRS sent it out, but you didn't get it. So the first thing you need to do is check Where's My Refund, which is pretty simple. And if the IRS said they sent it out and it's been 2 or 3 weeks, then you need to address that question. So the IRS has a tracing process. So if you were supposed to get your refund either by direct deposit or a paper check, then you can contact the IRS and follow their tracing procedures. There's a form to fill out. Lots of times they will start the trace just by you making the phone call, and then they'll send you information in the mail to figure out, for them to start the whole process. Unfortunately, for lost refunds, it can take a while to resolve because the IRS doesn't think they should be sending out duplicate checks if that check was actually still out there waiting for you to deposited in your bank or if it actually has been deposited somewhere. So it is a process that you can call the IRS about. Oh, one last question. So this is a question that has come up this week when people are trying to file tax returns. In order to e-file your tax return, not just anyone can e-file your return. You need to identify yourself, and with the tax return software, they ask you to put in your prior year AGI or a PIN that appears on your prior year return. So whatever year you're working on, you have to go back to that prior year return and get that information off the return to verify it's you and put it into the software for 2023, assuming it's 2023. The IRS really isn't going to give that information out to you. And that's because they use that information as identifying information. They're not going to give it back out for potentially an identity thief. So you've got to get a hold of your prior year return. And this is a lesson going forward. Always keep your tax returns at least for 3 years. And we are coming to a close here because we got to our half hour and we promised not to keep you any longer than that. So remember, you can send us questions. Even if this is over and you're watching it on the recording, you can send us a question through Facebook and we will see the question and we will get back to you. You can also apply for help if you live in Kentucky. Here is the phone number and the website. If you live in Arkansas, here is the phone number and the website. And even if you don't live in one of those states, please reach out to us and we will find you help at another low-income taxpayer clinic. There are 135 clinics in the country, almost one in every state. Some states have many, and we'll find you local help for your tax controversy. So thanks for participating today. Tune in next month where we're going to talk about tax debt.